Hello and welcome to the All for One podcast. Today I am joined by Becky Nevin, who is attorney in fact from Conscious Contracting. Becky, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much. Really excited to be here with you today.
Oh, I'm so excited as well. And so with that, would you please go ahead and share a little bit about who you are in this crazy world today and anything that you feel comfortable sharing?
Sure. Well, as you said, my name is Becky Nevin. That's actually the name I go by with my friends and family. So please call me that. But my legal name is actually Rebecca Lee Nevin. And I state that because it's a very important part of what I do. I help people understand the difference between their legal name and their actual name. And there is quite a difference, and it makes all the difference in the world. And it's the foundation of what I call conscious contracting, is being aware of how you have one name and you also have a legal name, which totally resides in a different jurisdiction. And if you don't understand that distinction, you can get into a lot of trouble.
Gotcha. All right. So I guess as we learn a little bit more about your story, and how you came to this journey, what would you share with us was a pinnacle moment for you?
Great question. Thanks for asking. I wasn't really planning to be in this. Excuse me, a leader in this movement. I about 10 years ago, I was living on a little 6 acre piece of land with a very, very, very tiny house. When I bought it, it had 2 bedrooms and 1 bath. And, probably my husband and I were the only people in the world who cared about that little piece of land and that little tiny house, right? And we had already sensed that something was off in the world, which is why, we were trying to start a life where we could live off grid,
Mm.
or at least try, and raise our own food, because we knew that they were selling poisonous food next to non-poisonous food in the grocery store, which is insane that it's even allowed. If you have a little bit of extra money, you can have the non-poisonous food. Just crazy to me that that exists in our life. But um, so we were gonna homestead, and we got our mortgage like every good citizen out there, and started planting trees. And I had my second and third children were born there. So we're building a little life for ourselves. And the banks sent me a letter a couple years into our mortgage and said, hey, we're no longer servicing your mortgage. These guys are gonna. I was like, all right, I figured kind of a normal thing. So being kind of diligent. I was a project manager. I worked for a software company. I like things, I like the process outlined. So I just looked at the paperwork and I saw, okay, there's a clause. They're allowed to sell my mortgage provided they, update the public record, which, I assumed you go to a county record and you say, so and so sold it to so and so and all done. Well, they hadn't done that. And I was like, this mortgage is kind of a big thing in my life, right? It's most of the money I spend out every month. It's the longest contract I've ever signed in my whole life. My kids
Mhm.
will be out of the house by the time I complete paying it off. I want to make sure the paperwork's dialed in. Okay, so I thought that was pretty obvious thing to do. So I sent him a letter and I said, hey, according to this clause, you're supposed to do this. Can you just, you know, send it to me, the proof that there's a paperwork trail that you're selling from this company to this company. And the way they responded to me was like a lightning bolt of truth. They sent me back a photocopy of my original note
Mhm.
that I had signed when I got my mortgage, and a photocopy of the deed of trust that was already on the public record. I could have gone and got myself.
Okay.
Okay. And the weird thing about these documents is the new company's name wasn't on it. And they weren't, there weren't transfer documents. I was like, I already have photocopies of these two documents. So you're saying if anyone on the planet has photocopies of these two documents, they own my house or my mortgage at least? Like I could hand you
Mm.
a copy and then you'd be servicing my loan? There was no indication that the new bank's name was on it anywhere. And I was baffled to be like, why is this their response? And that's where I started going down the rabbit hole and realizing that, first of all, banks don't loan you money, they loan you your own money. Your signature creates value. And as soon as your signature creates value, they exchange your signature and get the money. So your house is paid the moment you sign. Okay. The banks just never tell you this because guess what? Then they couldn't collect 30 years of interest, which more is usually more than double what the original cost of the house is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, they then sell the note that you signed that created the value into a mortgage-backed security product, and it's out in the stock market. My home loan is still in the stock market, even though I don't live in that home anymore, making money for the banks. um, so after I sent a second letter to the bank, I said, I asked you for the thing that was in my document and you sent me this other thing and your name's not even on it. Like, what's the deal? Obviously, I wrote it much more formally.
Right. Just to the point. It's fine. Yeah.
And guess how they responded? They didn't send me a letter. They said, "Oh, we're transferring you to this third bank."
Oh.
Okay, so what do you do with that information? You
I
guys
don't know.
could
What did you do with the information?
I didn't know. I was sitting there going like, who do I even pay my mortgage to now?
Okay.
The second bank clearly couldn't prove that they didn't put anything in the county record. They didn't follow any of the contracts I signed. And they didn't respond to my letters like I assumed a bank should. And I find out later because they can't, because they didn't actually own anything. They purchased data from the previous bank. And so by the time the third bank got around, sent them the same letter, knowing that they couldn't comply. Because if the second bank couldn't, how could the third bank comply, right?
Sure.
All of a sudden, they're going to produce these magical documents that weren't there in their possession. So by the time the third bank had received my letter, they were already considering me in default on my loan, even though I didn't even know who to pay. So already, these letters take back and forth time. I was already 45, 60 days late in their opinion.
Okay.
Even though none of them had validated the debt. And according to fair debt collection practices, they can't claim any collection activity while they're in the process of validating the debt. Yet these evil banks went ahead and kept saying, nope, you're 60 days late. And so I'm stuck in this bind going, oh my God, I could pay this company, right? Basically the ransom, they're extorting me right now. And I could concede, and then I could, give tribute to this bank for 30 years, or I could, try to figure out a way out of this. And ultimately I lost that battle because I was up against, pure evil. They're lying. They're not creating records. Even when they went through the foreclosure process, my name wasn't done correctly on the documents. I'm still listed as pending service for my foreclosure case. And yet the sheriff showed up to my house and kicked me out about 6 months later after the whole thing went and done, because I was not prepared or educated in, what to do in the situation. I was taking care of little babies at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And I spent 6 months of my life going to the library every day to try to research and figure out what remedies I had. And ultimately, I wasn't able to figure it out in time. So, I lost my house, and I had to do a lot of soul searching after that to figure out my next steps with, a newborn, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, depending on me. And in the loss of my house, we lost essentially everything inside it too, because we fought to the end, because we knew that, we hadn't, the bank that was foreclosing on our house had never proved that they ever even had a stake in our mortgage. And we had proof that we had asked it 100 times. And when we took it to court, the judge ultimately said there's no jurisdiction, which was just pure gaslighting.
Okay.
So it took a couple years, did some soul searching. Like, how can this happen? Like, is this really true? What just happened to me? Luckily, I had some family members who let us couch surf, and we started rebuilding our lives. And I ended up moving to Hawaii,
Nice.
trying to bask in some of the beautiful energy of an active volcano and do some healing. And I
Mm.
got into the spiritual side of contracting, and I ultimately realized that we create our own reality. I firmly believe that. And I believe that I created that situation in
Mm.
order to awaken to all the other things. Because once you won't go down one of the rabbit holes, and people, I think, enter the sovereignty space through lots of different rabbit holes, but the holes are all connected.
Yeah.
They all lead down to a big, deep cave where there's lots to uncover. And so I spent a couple of years uncovering all the other things that are wrong. And then a couple of years ago, I decided to help people, and I wanted to do it in a way where I could teach practical tools that were actually useful and not conspiracy theory. So I built a free course called Conscious Contracting Freedom Foundations, and I teach people how to get the American national or state national passport, and that helps you correct your political status, and helps you separate your living being essence from your artificial fiction, which is what the banks are contracting with anyways. And then I teach you how to cancel your contract with the IRS in that course. So that was the beginning, and that was
Okay.
about 5 years ago. So I've been
Awesome.
talking a long time.
Okay, no, you're great. That's wonderful. I know you're just so passionate about this. This has become who you are and what you do on a daily basis, right? Is learn
Yeah,
more and
absolutely.
share with others and try to help awaken, more people to the truth. And um, one of the things I wanted to ask was, how do we know that our legal name is different than our sentient being name? How do we know? How did you find out? What did you find out?
Well, initially it just made sense to me because my parents, when I was born, the moment I was born, they had a name for me. They actually had a name for me before I was born, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I existed with that name, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so and then your birth certificate, and I explain this in lots of detail in my free course if you want to take it, but to
Okay.
summarize, it's printed on bonded paper, and there's actually two dates listed on it: the birth date of the living baby, and the birth, which is, it's creating a
Mm-hmm.
vessel in commerce. It has a separate birth date, and that certificate creates another legal fiction. And then later, you're right, you trade that certificate and you take it to the social security admin, and they give you an account number that it attaches to
Mm-hmm.
that state.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but there's plenty of people on this planet that exist without their account numbers, and without birth certificates weren't actually a common thing. People
Okay.
wrote down births in Bibles, family Bibles, and that's how they kept track, right? So we know we exist without a birth certificate, and they like to say, oh, it's just a record of your birth, but it's not. It has a lot of more implications attached to it. So to me, that resonates in my soul. Like, it makes sense that I can exist without that account number and without that piece of paper. Okay.
That is right.
Because of the act of creation that my parents did,
Mm-hmm.
right? Same with you guys. But
Mm-hmm.
there are actual codes
Okay.
in, okay, I don't have them all memorized. Every
No.
state has their own code that defines
Mm-hmm.
what a person is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the Nevada one, it's very, very clear.
Okay.
And it defines a person. I remember there was like a political gaffe by John Kerry a long time ago, and we got binders full of people, right? And everyone didn't understand that. But everyone who's in government knows that a person is an artificial fiction
Okay.
when they refer to a person. And they intentionally make the language confusing, because when normal people hear the word person, they're like, oh, it's me, like the actual me, the soul me, not my artificial name.
So what exactly is the artificial name, or sometimes I hear it called as a dead entity, things like that. So what actually is it in
It's a
in the
business
code?
name. Essentially, In
Okay.
the codes, it's a business name, and so
Okay.
they have flavors of business names, right? So
Mm.
you can be a sole proprietorship, which is what your birth certificate name is. It's a sole proprietorship.
Okay.
Consider that. You can also create an LLC entity. You can create a trust entity. You can create a sole, a one member LLC. They have different
Mm.
flavors of persons, right? The person just usually attaches to a sole proprietorship, but it's essentially a business name and a business of one attached to, and that business just happens to have the same name your parents gave you,
Oh,
right? But it could have a different name, right? You can operate under any business name if you want, and that's some of the things I teach you, is that it's really important to separate yourself and create other entities that you can operate under,
mm-hmm.
right? That don't have the same adhesion to your living soul name, and
Okay.
then prevent people from mistaking you as your business, because you are not your business. You are, in law, you are the agent of your business, right? You determine how your business operates, but you are not it.
Okay. One of the things I heard recently, it was sort of like, play on words, signature
Mm-hmm.
as a sign of nature.
Okay.
How do we know what the power of the signature creates?
Well, there are actually two types of signatures, right? There's an
Okay.
autograph.
Okay.
Okay. An autograph is created as a piece of art, and it's an expression of your soul's creativity, right? And
Mhm.
that's what they're trying to capture when they're trying to link us to our dead entity, right? They're trying to capture your soul spark, your soul energy, because dead artificial businesses, they can't do anything without our soul creative energy. So when you're operating, that's why artists and even movie stars they'll do their autograph, because they're representing their soul, right? And their soul
Mm.
spark and their creativity and the thing that comes from God, not a dead business that can only interact because a person puts life into it, right? So a signature is actually the artificial fiction version. And when you sign a signature, you are acting for a dead entity. So you're putting on a hat and saying, I'm acting in my artificial fiction's name, or I'm acting as a trustee of a trust, or I'm acting as the CEO of a corporation. And when you're putting on a different hat, you do a signature. And when you are acting in your soul, you are doing an autograph.
Got it.
but
Amazing.
both of them but both of them still represent that a living, breathing human is interacting and breathing life into whatever the contract is that you're signing, or that you're autographing.
Okay. And so that then kind of gets in a little bit to operating in the public and
Mm-hmm.
operating in the private.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay,
how
so
would you describe that?
great question. So when you are operating in the private, you're operating as your creative spark from God, right? As you're signing an autograph and you're making soul to soul contracts with other living beings who have souls, right? So that's in the private. And we have, the Constitution gives us the right to contract freely and impedes Congress from having any sort of interference into the contracts that consenting living adults have between each other, right? So that's a powerful thing that is not taught at all or well in schools these days, that we have the power to contract however we want as long as we're consenting. Also, that contracts are supposed to have equal value, right? They're supposed to be like, the reason you get into a contract is you have something I want, I have something you want, it's an equal exchange. Okay, so that's in the private, and I that's what I advocate and I teach people how to do, right? The other way of contracting is in the public, or in commerce, and you're contracting, and you can only contract as the agent or in another role through a dead entity, which would be an LLC or a trust, or your sole proprietorship, which usually has your similar name, right? And you are contracting with other artificial fictions when you're in that role, and that is not necessarily a soul to soul contract, right? That is usually a corporation to corporation contract. And when I say corporations, I mean all the flavors,
Okay.
including a one person corporation or an LLC, right?
Okay. All right. Whew. Um, it really is such a spiritual path to come to these conclusions and then, have these aha moments and then make some decisions on how you're going to interact differently than
Mm-hmm.
than you've always known, right? An individual has that moment of realization, then it's like, okay, what next? What do I do next? And so many times I've also thought about the um the process of the realization in terms of potentially anger, fear, and anything else that can come out, almost like the 12 stages of grief to some degree. And do you have any thoughts? Was that any part of your experience?
I absolutely went through the 12 stages of grief, and I've seen people come into the space, right? I've been doing this a long time. It's my life. Go through the stages of grief. And it's totally natural because when you go down this path, you realize it's a spiritual, well, let's say battle. Okay.
Mhm.
There's as much spiritualness inside the realization that you are a divine spark of God here with the purpose. You are not meant to contract dead entity to dead entity, right? Because when you do that, you are removing people's humanities. And the people who control the planet, like the banks and the courts and the system, right?
Mhm.
They want us to remove our spirituality, and they want us to be dead entities, because that way you can justify treating people horrifically, right? Because you're just an account number, you're just a ledger, you're just a balancing of the books, and you are not, someone who living, breathing, dying, caring,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
It's really a spiritual mission to realize we need to go back to contracting soul to soul. So instead of practicing medicine on people, we heal people. Instead of offering a poison version of food and a non-poison version of food, we see that as a morally repugnant thing that shouldn't be allowed, right? But because the grocery store is contracting with your account number, they don't have to look at the fact that they sell poisonous food that way,
Mhm.
right? And we who shop in there also don't see it that way either. The grocery store is just trying to balance ledger books,
Yeah.
right? And treating us like account numbers and treating us like ledgers on the paper, and they're not actually caring about the health of the products they carry in their store. And this isn't just grocery stores, it's like almost any store. Clothing stores, they've
Right.
moved us all to synthetic clothing, away from natural clothing, and it does the same thing as those poisonous foods versus non-poisonous foods, right? And so when you discover that they want it this way, and that basically everything they tell you is a lie, you have to go through those grief like steps, I believe. I mean, it's just a natural way of overcoming it. And if you don't go through them, you get trapped in anger. And
Mhm.
I spent 3 years studying Dolores Cannon's QHHT, spiritual hypnotherapy. I did a ton of regressions. I got up to level 2 training, and I did it I thought I might become a spiritual hypnosis practitioner, but I really did it to self-heal, to
Okay.
go through those grieving steps and be like, why is the world so awful? Why do we steal people's homes? Why is our money fake? Because our money is not what most people believe it to be. It's actually debt, which is the opposite of value, right? And yet we all, worship it. Lots of the culture worships it, a dead entity again. So the spirituality side is really important because it'll help you get from that anger and all the through the steps. To me, it helped me get through the steps and realize I chose to be here. I created all the bad things in my life
Mm.
because I wanted to wake up and be of service to people after my awakening and after I'd healed myself. And that's what I intend to do with the rest of my life, is help humanity see this and help humanity get back to soul contracting, as opposed to contracting through these artificial dead entities that have, no life force. They don't care if our air is poisoned or our food's poisoned or there's chemtrails. They don't care about that.
Mm-mm.
But I do because
Right,
I got to
right.
breathe the air and eat the food.
So tell us a little bit about the creation of the conscious contracting course. Let's start there.
Okay.
You know, how you built it from the ground up. How did you go about educating yourself to and then decide to make that course?
Okay. Well, like I said, I had been studying Dolores Cannon's QHHT, and I had sort of started building a resource to be able to do that.
Mm,
And then all of a sudden, it just sparked like in my brain that wasn't my thing. Other people do that. There's a world out there where people do QHHT sessions. I highly recommend one, but this was my unique thing that I could offer. Right, I had a skill for it. I had a software background. I could put together a website. I was a project manager, so I was like, I know how to organize things in a way, hopefully, that people could understand complex information, right?
mhm.
And so I thought, I got to do this. And so I did a big pivot, and I took all my website assets, and I turned them around, and I just sat down on the weekends and started recording little pieces of information and try to string them together in a way that people could understand and actually get value out of, right? So it's one thing to know that everything's a lie, but it's another thing to be like, okay, I don't want to just sit here and feel hopeless. What can I do that will actually improve my life? Knowing all this that we know. And I still to this day think that the best thing you can do to get started is get a state national passport or an American national passport. And part of the course, and it's totally free, walks you step by step what you need to do. And it's somewhat of a complicated process, but at the end of it, you can get the official document. And to me, it's the best proof that people have that what I'm talking about is real. The State Department acknowledges the difference between a living and a dead entity. And they also acknowledge that a US citizen is different than a state national, right? So a US citizen is the corporate version of the living man or woman who was born in the United States on the land and soil, the de jure version.
Mm,
So getting that passport and going through the process also teaches you about the birth certificate and its value. And then you take the value of the birth certificate, put it in your passport file, and your American national, state national passport then becomes the document that proves you're an internationally protected person and that you are as valuable as God intended you to be on the planet, right? And you will not get kidnapped by police officers or corporate policy enforcers when you have this passport. So it's the best protection if you intend to be serious about doing things in this movement, to get that in place, to prove kind of to yourself that these are real things. And then you've laid yourself a safety net when you want to go try to and live in your sovereignty, like travel freely, like as the founding fathers intended us to do, not with all these fake contracts they require us to get, right? Like a driver's license or stickers on our car every year that say we're still valid,
mhm.
that um all of those things are voluntary contracts that don't apply to the living. They apply to the corporate version of you or the dead entity. And the passport helps makes that distinction. And then, of course, the next thing is don't feed the beast, which is what taxes do. Yeah.
So how does getting the state national American national passport change jurisdiction over the sentient being version of ourselves?
Well, it doesn't change it. It
Okay.
just corrects the record. So
Okay.
this our society assumes you are your birth certificate name, right? That's the assumption. Everybody believes that. My parents still believe that to this day, even though I've been doing this work 10 years. Right? Because that's how the system wants us to believe that. When you go to get a bank account, they want you to assume. When you go to court, they want you to assume. Okay. What the passport does is it adds what I call an explanatory statement, a
Okay.
contract addendum to their form they have you fill out to get your passport, where you get to explain the difference. Okay. And you might say, what's the big deal? Well, when you put it in words and you sign it, right, within a notary under penalty of perjury, then you send it into the State Department. They accept your contract and they will send you back, if you request, a certified file confirming that they accepted your contract. So you are American national, state national by just by being born on the land and soil of one of the 50 states.
Okay.
Okay, but the system assumes that you are agreeing to contract as your dead entity, and your passport helps remove that assumption.
Got it.
And then your signature in the future determines the role the hat you're putting on, right? How you sign in the future determines what role. So you can still choose to open a bank account and act as the agent of your dead entity. That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
But I want you to do it consciously, right? I want you to be aware of what you're doing when you're signing your signature versus your autograph. And
Abs-
most people are not aware of the difference, and they go about life unconscious to the contracts they're signing.
right. Yeah. Um, okay. So just going into the post office. So I've done part of that process.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember feeling nervous. Like
Yeah.
going in there and being like, are they going to tell me that I can't sign this way? I've gone into the DMV or I've gone to a car dealership and tried to sign a certain way. And they're like, nope, you can't do that. That you can't sign that way because that's not the way that you signed on, say, your driver's license or whatever, right? And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I know there's something that I'm not doing quite right here, and they are definitely not doing something right. But like when you go into the post office, is there anything to be nervous about at that point once you are giving the person your information that you want them to have?
No, no. Well, first of all, if they tell you you can't sign, okay, they're impairing the obligation of Congress of contracts, right? Which Congress specifically said is not allowed. No artificial fiction, no entity is allowed to tell you how to contract if you are an adult of age. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when the post office does that, just like when back in the day when they told us we had to wear these things on our face.
Right.
No, we didn't. But they do that. That's what they're doing. They're making assumptions and they're hoping that you comply. And that's what sovereignty is in opposition to. Sovereignty is like, no, I'm an intelligent person and I can make my own decisions, right? I can determine whether I need to wear this thing on my face or how I want to sign a contract, right? But the problem is sometimes those institutions are right because so many people walk around this world not even understanding the contracts they want to or they're signing,
Right.
right? So the government justifies, well, you guys don't know what you're doing. They treat us like infants and children, and so they implement stuff as if they under that guise that they're looking out for us, right? But the more sovereign way to be is to understand the contract you are in and take authorship of them
Mm-hmm.
and stand up for your own rights. If you want to wear a mask, go for it. If you want to sign a certain way, go for it. And when you go into I've gone in the post office many times with lots of different people to help them with the passport process.
Okay.
And sometimes I've had to literally practically leap across the counter and prevent the gal behind the counter from separating the birth certificate, because one of the things you do is you get your birth certificate authenticated. So not only is your birth certificate there, but it has two extra special pieces of paper that you guys go through a lot of work to get. You got to send it into the state, you got to send it into the federal, and you get it authenticated. And then the post office gal just wants to tear away all that work. And that's not
No.
good. And so that's what sovereignty is. So it's standing up for your rights, your right to have that document, not have it broken, and your right to sign contracts the way you know is best for you, because you're the only person who can determine that, right?
Yep.
The
And
post
that's your
office person cannot determine what contract is best for you.
and it's your God-given right. It's natural. Would you call it natural law? I mean,
Yeah, I believe the founding law is like the golden rule, right?
mm,
God wants us here to test our free will. Okay. And then we have karma and it comes back to us. So we go out and test and we say, if I poke that person, they might poke back. Right.
Right.
That's how it works, right? Maybe I don't poke that person. Maybe I cooperate with that person and we build a life together. Oh,
Hmm.
that sounds like a much better way of trying things. Okay. But
Yeah.
we have the free will to poke the person. And then we're going to get the repercussions of our free will. That is natural law. It's better when instead of saying I'm going to poke you, we consent to a contract and say, let's do this together instead for our mutual benefit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. We are supposed to implement our free will and test it here, and that's what contracting really is about determining what we want to try, putting it on paper, and interacting in a mutually hopefully beneficial way with people. And it's all been corrupted by this system of attaching artificial fiction and removing the humanity from our contracts.
It's both empowering to know that, and then
Yeah.
also on the flip side of it, just again, like outrageous and sad too. Like
Yeah.
there's a bit of sadness there. So let's talk a little bit about your Titan Trust program for a moment. So after conscious contracting, then you went on to create another program called the Titan Trust. So tell us
Yeah.
about that. What's that all about?
Yes. Well, once you get your passport and you kind of get a proof that, we're onto something here, this is not fake. Most people want to learn how to take the next step. And the next step is how do I operate? How do I withdraw myself from this system that is abusive most people can agree it's fairly abusive, right? And I show people how to operate in the private using trusts and IRS 508c1a entities, they're called churches, but you can use any spiritual word you want, like sanctuary or temple. And these types of entities are, according to the IRS code, mandatorily tax exempt. And then depending on how you structure it, and I provide teaching tools and I outline a whole strategy. You can structure your trust strategy and your church strategy. Some people call them private memberships too,
Okay.
and create different silos on how you want to live. And I teach people how to do this because the elite in our society are doing this. They protect their assets through trusts and using other entities, right? And I teach how to do that, and that allows you to set your own rules. So when you spin up a trust, or when you spin up a church, part of the creation of that is defining how it works, right? And all of my documents have like a spiritual vibe in it and a meaning, right? It can be as simple as taking care of the mind and body of your family, right?
I mean,
Or
that's pretty
really
important.
simple, but it's your God-given right to take care of your family, right?
Yeah.
Simplest thing. And it's a spiritual mission. I made it a spiritual mission to do that. And so I operate as, tax exempt as a result of that. And then the rules the system's rules don't necessarily apply to me unless I choose to put on that hat, right? So I choose not to enroll my kids into the public school system because I believe they're indoctrination camps, right? The school system says you're required to register. Well, my kids have their American national passport, so they are not. I have made a clear distinction that they are not their all caps name. They are not their dead entity. That dead entity you might think has to enroll in public school, but it can't contract because it can only sign registration forms if the living being does it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So good luck trying to argue that with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the things I do is I use trust to protect my family's ability to homeschool. People use them, including myself, to protect my health care choices, right? The system tells you that you need to have insurance if you want to go and get health care.
Okay.
Well, I believe that they are practicing medicine because they use that word in their definitions,
Mm-hmm.
and they use licenses to justify practicing medicine instead of actually healing people. And so I prefer to avoid that system.
Sure.
And I prefer self healing methods and natural plant-based cures for things. And so my trust also allows me to make those decisions. And then also, like, I prefer to grow my own food, so I have a homestead.
Mhm.
And the system doesn't even want you to drink raw milk. Wonder why that is. It's for your health, I
Good
bet.
for you. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And
Yeah.
so I, as an adult who can contract consciously, choose to have the right to drink raw milk if I want. So those are just little samples of the things you can do. And so what building a private structure for yourself using trust, it is the true form of sovereignty, because you are saying, this is how I want to live, right? These are my rules. And then you live them, and you separate yourself from the system's rules. And and there's very powerful laws, trust laws, that protect your right to operate as a trust. And the other thing is it is very, you can name your trust whatever you want. I can call my trust conscious contracting trust, right?
Okay.
And nobody's going to confuse that with my name, right? So it's another way of removing yourself from the name game, I like to call it, where I always put on my trustee hat and I operate as the trustee of my trust, and nobody confuses it with me, right? Everybody knows a trust is different than my name, because the names are different. And then part of Titan Trust, the other cool part of it is you learn how to operate in the private, and then we claim the trust that the system created for you, the birth certificate. So we claim it and we put it inside its own trust, and we use IRS paperwork to do this process. And then if you ever have to fight the system, right, and go to court, you have paperwork proof that you are not your artificial name, right? You're an acting agent for it. And I have a bunch of people who've done my program that have court cases that have stalled out or been canceled when the banks come after them, because we basically use their own paperwork against them. And instead of sounding like conspiracy theorists and crazy people, we use the law.
Okay.
And we say, look, at this code says that artificial fictions exist. They can be sole proprietorships. And here's the IRS paperwork that proves I am not the account number that was given to me when I got a social security number. Because I existed for 8, 10, 20. Some people don't get them till they're 18, right? I
Right.
existed for 18 years without this number. There's no way I could be that number.
So you operate as a counselor at law. Is that accurate?
They're both similar meanings, right?
Okay.
I like
That's great.
counselor at law because people kind of get that I'm there are plenty of court cases and doctrine that, like, being able to advocate for yourself in law, or choosing who you have advocate with you, is a right. Okay, it's not a privilege, and there's a difference, right?
Mm.
So when the system tries to tell you you have to get an attorney to represent you, you need to understand what that contract is, right? It's giving up your autonomy, because the system wants their attorneys to follow the rules, because it preserves the system.
That's right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
an attorney has to get a license, which is permission to do something that's unlawful. If you look up the definition,
Okay.
that's a whole other, I could have a whole talk on just that conversation.
Okay. Great.
Okay. But it also requires them to take an oath to the bar and an oath to the court. Okay. So where's their allegiance if they're taking an oath to the bar and an oath to the court? Is it to you, the person they represent? No. And guess why? Because that's where they get all their money from, right? The bar and the courts, right? They play the game with you that they care about you, but they have taken an oath to care about someone over some other entity, a dead entity, over you, the living soul. So they can't play the name game. They can't go into court and argue the separation between the artificial and the legal, because they will get kicked out of the club.
Okay. They like their club.
They love their club. They go golfing with judges. I mean, the club needs to exist in order for that system to perpetuate, because if it didn't have those things in place, it would crumble, because it's all fraud.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they use those tools they do the same thing to doctors, right?
Right.
If you're not part of the club and you don't toe the line and you try to put this cheap cure out on the market, you're either going to get dead
Right.
or you're going to get kicked out of the club,
Funny,
and
not
you're going
funny.
to be embarrassed, right? And then you're going to go have to, be with the healers, right? Who don't have the status that a doctor has, even though in my mind, healer is much more higher in status than a pill pusher, drug pusher, basically.
Yeah.
Um, so, anyways, as a counselor of law,
Okay.
I do not have an oath to the bar.
Right.
I make that very, very clear. I
Right.
am not giving legal advice. I'm counseling and coaching you and giving you an education. Okay. But you are ultimately responsible for your decisions. And that's how it should be. Instead of handing your decision over to another person and removing your authority, if you want to be sovereign, you stand on your own decisions. You take advice from smart people and then you make your own decision, right? Is how the world should work.
Hmm.
And so that's what I do offer that. And I've coached people to represent themselves in court and have had lots of success with that. And I feel like I have to operate that way because then I can take to court arguments that bar attorneys cannot take because they'll get kicked out of the club. And I am actually loyal and creating a soul to soul contract with the person I'm helping. I'm not loyal to the court. I actually prefer to use the court's own rules against itself to get the result for the client. And I'm not I don't care if I get kicked out of the bar card club because I was never in it.
Right, exactly. Oh my gosh. I have often heard courts actually being referred to as banks.
Yes, they
Accurate.
absolutely are banks.
Okay.
They're absolutely banks, and this is a deeper rabbit hole. So you hearing me talk, you're gonna have to feel my energy and trust what I'm saying. But if you do your own research, you
Mhm.
will come to this conclusion. But just think about the words that they use
Okay.
when in the banks, okay? Because words matter. The definition of words matter. And when I started this, I went to the law books. Black's Law
Mhm.
is the law book. It defines the words, and most people don't even know what license is. Go look it up. It's important. And you
Okay.
need to look it up yourself because me just saying it is not as powerful as you doing it yourself. Okay. But there's other things that the words that they use in courts that indicate that it's a bank. Charge,
Church.
charges.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's an accounting term that
Yeah.
banks use. They are charging you. Okay.
Okay.
So you can go in and settle the charges, which just is balancing the books.
Okay.
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 It's right there. Okay. Then what do? You get a bond. Okay. That's an
Mm.
insurance term. That's also banking. A bond is insurance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what your birth certificate is also. It's a bond. It's on bonded paper. It's signed by the probate court. So it actually marks you in the world of the dead, your account. Okay.
Okay.
So right there in and then I have personal experience that I have tendered securities using my signature and paid court fees.
Oh,
Okay. And they accept them because they are a bank and they can go to Fedwire and exchange securities for Federal Reserve notes and settle charges.
okay.
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 That is like deep level stuff you guys got to do some studying on.
Sure.
But when you have an American national passport, you are foreign to every single court, every single one. They do not apply to you unless you injure another living soul.
Okay.
Okay. Then they can get jurisdiction on you. But if you don't have the proper sticker on your car and you're driving around traveling, right? They
Hmm.
have no jurisdiction because there's no injured party. You not having that sticker on your car does not injure somebody.
Right.
Okay. And I actually have a book about this where it's called Without Recourse. You can also sign without recourse, and the courts don't have jurisdiction. But your passport creates that you are an internationally protected person, and it separates you from the dead, so the courts don't have jurisdiction under you as long as you go about living and not injuring other living people,
Okay.
right? And so that means you can do things like not drive with stickers on your car or registrations or even a driver's license. And it means that as long as you um don't physically injure someone's person or property, the courts have no say. And so through the Titan trust structure and through the passport and stuff, we've successfully argued lack of jurisdiction in the court and won court cases as pro se
I love it
litigants.
so much. Yes. Okay. So tell me then, share a couple of examples of how you've worked with people and came out on the other side
Okay,
feeling
well, let me
feeling
start with the
stronger,
let me let me
making
start with
headway.
the
Okay.
normie case that I just won. Actually, on
Okay.
the 7th, we got the verdict. Okay.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And it was a normal case where my client came to me, and her landlord had behaved atrociously. Okay, so there was actual injured party. The
Mm.
reason why court should exist,
Okay.
right? A landlord's negligence damaged my client's property, and there was a case.
Okay.
Okay. And she could have gone and got an attorney, but she came to me because she knew how passionate that I would help her argue. Okay. And initially, she just wanted to get, her security deposit back, which she was supposed to get the next day. A tree fell on the apartment she was renting, destroyed the whole roof, damaged all the property inside of it, and the landlord, against the lease, refused to give the deposit back. That the gal needed to go find a new place to live literally within 24 hours notice, right? And
Mm.
all of her stuff destroyed.
Hmm.
Okay, so she was just hoping to get, that kind of compensation. But as I coached her, we found out that the landlord had been told many times by the county that those trees were rotting and they needed to come down. And it hadn't been just recently, it had been negligence for many years.
Okay.
We found out that she represented the place as habitable, but she had been told that there was a huge mold problem, and all she did was paint over it. So when the tree fell down, the mold was exposed. All this girl's stuff was covered in mold, right? Okay. And then she found out that the mold had been a problem for previous renters, and some of those previous renters had health issues. So I coached her into getting the evidence and not just asking for her her physical damages and her deposit back,
Yeah.
but compensation. And it ended up being about $50,000. And then I said, because she was willfully not giving you back your deposit as she was supposed to right away, willfully not listening to the city, and for the mold and the tree issue, you could ask for triple damages. Okay, so she did, and I showed her how to frame that. And
Right.
then because she needed to stop this woman from being a serial bad landlord. And so she interviewed the past 3 tenants
Okay.
and got them to sign affidavits, put it in her case, and she got $100,000 for punitive damages to prevent this landlord from continuing her bad actions. Okay. And
Wow.
she got literally everything she asked for. Dollars. And she's actually going to be speaking in my about her experience in my live cohort program next month. And that was just like a normal case, right? And then I touch on cases that are confront the name game.
Okay.
And so I use the Titan Trust structure, where we take your birth certificate name, we put it inside a trust, right? So now you can act as the trustee of that name.
So is that the trade name trust?
Yes,
Okay.
I call it a trade name trust,
Okay. Great.
right? And so what it does is everyone links themselves to the name because the letters are the same, right? Your birth certificate name is the same as the name your parents gave you. So
Okay.
you must be the same thing, right? By moving your name into the trade name trust, you mentally separate. Now I'm the trustee. I put on my trustee hat, and we have IRS paperwork that confirms. They have boxes where you can
Mm.
put your social security numbers and make yourself the authority over it, not it. Okay. So you take those documents to court. And I have a Wells Fargo trying to sue one of my clients for some credit card debt that she never owed because her signature created the value. And the judge was told, okay, before this case starts, you have to determine, do you have jurisdiction? Okay. They can have jurisdiction over the dead entity, but the dead entity cannot contract. So they can't, the living person is the one signing, the credit card application, creating the value. So the dead entity can't contract. And when your name is in a trust, they have to sue the trustee, and they don't know to sue the trustee. So they sue the wrong party. So we go
Oh.
to court, and this is bar card attorneys cannot do this or they'll kicked out of the club, but I can do it happily. The judge is supposed to, the establishing jurisdiction is what they call a threshold issue,
Okay.
right? You can't cross the threshold into someone's house until you determine you've been invited and that you have the authority to enter,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Threshold issue. A
Okay.
judge has to determine it before the case can proceed. It's in every single law, in every single case. Even a regular bar card attorney knows jurisdiction is a threshold issue. What courts do is just assume it. Assume,
Mm,
assume, assume, assume. And everyone goes along with the assume game.
sure.
Right? Just like everyone went along, we have to wear these things. Assume, assume, assume.
Yep.
No, I say you can assume, prove. Here's my side of the argument. Where's yours? And they
Mhm.
can't. Okay. So guess what this judge did? Instead of doing his job, they send it to ADR, hoping we would just go along. And ADR means arbitration. So they
Okay.
want you to compromise with the bank and maybe come up with a deal.
Yeah.
And if you agree to the assumption that they have the authority to send you to ADR. And that's a trick the judges use. They
Mm,
make it seem like, oh, the judge determined you have to go here. So, not being a bar card, I said, you cannot do that. Your own code, your own law says you can't send me to ADR if you haven't determined jurisdiction.
that's
This
right.
case is stayed.
Okay.
Okay. So
Okay.
the judge sits there and does nothing for months because guess what? When I win this, I tell everybody about it. And then everyone realizes the courts all play the same game. All of them do. Every single case. Okay. So it's been sitting there, sitting there, sitting there. The ADR person, we say if you proceed while this case is stayed and we're waiting jurisdiction, and you proceed pushing conferences and ADR, sanction you. Okay, so we sanction. She recuses herself from the case.
Oh, okay.
The attorneys for Wells Fargo, they don't know what to do with us. They can't acknowledge, they won't even acknowledge the paperwork we filed because they have to act like this.
Okay.
They recuse themselves. Wells Fargo has to go get new attorneys to get
Oh
them
my
in the case.
gosh.
Okay.
Okay.
And then at the end of February, so this is what, 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
the judge retires early. I can't say it's all my case, but it's still
See?
standing there. And
Oh
we
my
filed this
gosh.
in June,
Yeah.
waiting for the judge to determine jurisdiction.
Yep.
So when the judge retires, they try to spin up a new level of arbitration,
Yep.
and I'll just sanction the new person who they assign because they cannot proceed unless they determine. So the case has been stalled, stalled, stalled because as soon as the judge puts it in writing that I'm right,
Yep.
it's case closed for anyone who wants to use this method to stop banks from doing illegal stuff against their artificial fiction.
Oh my gosh. That is absolutely amazing. And
Yeah,
just
so
feels so empowering. That is so incredible.
yeah, and you guys, we can do this without bar cards. Become your own authority, right?
Yeah.
And take advice from smart people, but you become responsible, and that's what sovereignty is really, is being your own authority. And but you have to know the contracts you're dealing with, right? In
Right.
order to properly make informed decisions and to know your rights and to be able to stand up and say, no, you can't force me to sign things. No, you don't make me sign up for that contract I don't want to sign.
Yeah.
I'm a non-consenting adult in that case. And you're not allowed to force me into that a contract or assume that I am something that I am not.
That is just so lovely. It's amazing. I'm so stoked. And so I mean you use that as okay from a credit card perspective, but could it be applied to tickets, mortgages, other things that are more like
Yeah.
secured things? I don't know. I'm just asking like where else could you apply that particular method?
Yeah, I mean, Titan Trust is about a year old, right?
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I mean, we're at the tip of the spear here.
Okay.
Um, this gal who was like one of my first, before I even actually called it Titan Trust, right? I was creating these structures for people. And her case success was one of the reasons why I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta
Mhm.
make this easy for people to get and set up for themselves. So that's why I built the course because I was baffled. Why won't the judge just make a darn decision? Why is he violating his own rules? I called it out very, very clear, you
Yeah.
know. So I want people to know that they can fight against these courts um and win, and we can win uh by making them confront that they are only dealing with the artificial.
Okay.
And now we have it, we're using IRS forms, we're using trust documents, we are using law. Okay, we are not conspiratorial. I think in the older movement, people would go in and battle the court and say, you don't have jurisdiction over me, I'm the living woman. Well, actually, just showing up, they are going to assume jurisdiction, which they shouldn't. But if you show up where you've already established the record on paper,
Mm-hmm.
you can say, oh, I can show up, but I'm the trustee. And I'm here on a special appearance representing the trust that you are trying to, pierce. And trust law is really, really powerful. And so we use trust law against them because ultimately they're using trust law to claim authority over us through our birth certificate and the bond that they have a fiduciary role over. So when you set up my trust product, you're also correcting that. You're removing their assumed power over you.
Okay.
And I go into detail in the court in the class about that because it gets a little bit complex, but
Sure. So let's say we're doing the things, we've racked up all this debt, we've signed all these contracts, all these sort of things, and then we come into this new knowledge and education and we're like, okay,
yeah.
this is our path going forward. Once you establish the trust and you start operating these new ways, does it apply to the past, or is that sort of like still tied to the old way?
It would be hard to like reopen a case that had already been, solved, right?
Okay.
But the case I gave you an example of, which happened in Nevada, she had already proceeded with someone else helping her and then found me, and I had to actually unravel. So the case was still open, and so there was still hope for it. But once it's already been adjudicated, it's harder. So I do suggest, you gotta get your assumptions corrected first and then go into battle with the courts.
Okay.
But it should apply to any case where the court is assuming that you are the dead entity, right?
Okay.
And where there's no injured party. So anything that has to do with money, okay, including foreclosures, car repossessions, all of that, this method should work in a case, okay? But let me say, my example pointed out, judges broke the law, okay, by pushing the case, even though I clearly asked for jurisdiction, pushing it to ADR. That's breaking the law, okay? Yeah. So these entities break the law. You have to stand strong, and not all. Most people would automatically say, well, the judge said I better go to ADR, and that's how they get you to do. I said, the judge is breaking law. I'm calling him out on it, and I'm not afraid to because I'm not in the bar car club. But you have to know that I don't know how they can't let this win, right? Because then I break open this whole thing in their own court cases. They have to break the law to prevent this decision, which is why this case has been standing still since July. And all I'm asking is, do you have jurisdiction or not? It's a yes or no question.
Right.
And they can't answer it. That's why we're making our arguments so simple, and we're putting it on them. Mm-hmm. You made this assumption, I'm countering it, answer yes or no. Okay. And they can't dance around the yes or no. Well, they try, obviously they'll try. So when I say this is new stuff, we're at the cutting edge.
Okay.
I definitely would love to have courageous people try this on other things.
Okay.
But I can't determine how these bad actors are going to act because they don't follow the truth. Right? I like to work with people who follow the truth because you know how they're going to respond. They're going to follow the law. They're going to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Bad people are unpredictable because they're going to break the rules. And so that's also why I can't guarantee my results, because we're up against systematic, evil, systematic deception, systematic, boys club, inner club. Maybe there's women in it too, so I shouldn't call it that, but
yeah, most likely. I consider debt the modern day slavery.
Yes. It's actually worse than that, because we don't actually use real money. Our money that we think has value is debt. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it's controlled by a small very small subset of the population, and they make interest off of every single dollar that gets printed. Okay. They don't offer any service to humanity other than printing debt instruments, and yet they get 3%. And then our money devalues
Mm-hmm.
and we suffer. Okay. And then the fact that a bank can charge, and people just go along with it, just like poison food and non-poison food in the grocery store. They're like 8% interest. Do you realize that you're paying twice for your house?
Mm-hmm.
And people are just told to live on a planet that God wanted you to be on. You have to give up half of your life force energy every month or more
Or more.
just to live in a house. Okay. I got 7 cats and none of them pay rent. And, they just walk around and do what they want. That's how we're
Right.
supposed to. And here's the thing, people are like, well, you got to work for it. If we didn't have this system in place and we had higher conscious people, I believe we could figure out how to give everybody reasonably nice accommodations. We could have healthier, better food. We would have less poison in our water and our skies,
Mm-hmm.
right? If we wanted to solve those problems, we could very, very easily. There is enough, but they have to put us in this lack and this, fighting each other mode, grabbing for every fake piece of money in order for us to be in this low vibrational energy and not think that we can solve those big problems. Right.
Right.
Like you don't even try.
Because you're so consumed with everything that's going on outside of you, right? Like, and trying to figure out how to care for yourself and care for family if you have a family, or how to meet the demands of, the workplace and all that sort of stuff. And that's one of the things from a personal perspective that I've kind of been challenged with is the actual finding time to do all of these things. I have awareness that I need to do them and I need to make them happen, but yet I am, somewhat still involved in the daily grind. And so, if you had, coming from that point of view, what would be some suggestions that you would give to people like us who are still sort of like teetering?
Yeah, no, and this is a great question because I had the same thing. I had, babies and I had to redo my whole education. I went
Mm,
to UC Berkeley and I thought that was a good degree to get.
right.
I was a straight A student. I thought I was doing the right thing. And then all I realized, like, all of that is garbage. I got to relearn everything while raising babies and trying to, you know, have food on the table that's not poison
Yeah,
and a
right,
roof over my
exactly.
head, right? I
Yeah.
get it. And that's why I designed the free course. So it's like little bite-sized videos.
Okay.
So turn off fake news a little bit is my
Okay.
suggestion,
Yeah.
and just carve out a little bit of time, and don't try to do it all. Just like carve out a little bit of time to work on this, and consider it like self-improvement. It's as essential as your workout routine,
Yeah.
and your self-care routine. It's really a self-care because every little step adds up, and if you do a little bit at the end of the year, you're gonna be making the transition. Once you get the passport, it's so powerful, and then you have the foundation to do the other things.
Okay.
And then the other thing I offer is I have a monthly, I call it the cohort, the conscious contracting cohort, where every month I talk about something new and advanced, and you get access to all my other topics. And then another day of the month you can ask questions and hear other people ask questions. And so you can see there's a community that's building around this movement, that people are actually doing those things, taking baby steps or making great leaps, whatever they can manage in their life. And it's a way to, like, every month kind of have a reminder. Okay, let me do a little bit this month. Let me do a little bit this month, because it adds up. And getting the passport is a multi-step long process. You can't do it in a weekend because you have to send out and get your birth certificate authenticated by 2 different agencies.
Okay.
So don't feel like you have to, all of a sudden do everything all at once.
Okay.
But I think most people, when they fall down this rabbit hole, there's no climbing out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of just proceed forward at the pace you can manage.
Okay.
Um,
I have just a couple more questions before we wrap
sure.
up. I know you have a selective service rescission inside your free course. And
Yes.
I don't know if you've heard, but basically they have created what is an automatic registration to the Selective Service. They actually voted that in.
We'd have to look at that contract.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, you guys, that let's unpack that a little bit,
Yep.
okay?
Yep.
Because this is selective service is compulsionary enrollment in the military.
That's right.
And if you're like me, I don't believe any war is justified at all, no matter who's the good guy or bad guy. And I believe in my heart and soul and all that is good. We are one and we are all connected,
Mm-hmm.
and that my enemy is me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I morally cannot justify participating in any sort of war. I
Mm-hmm.
can participate in self-defense, of course.
Yes.
Okay, but that's a different beast. So requiring mandatory registration into the military to me is the most abhorrent contract that was ever created in the history of contract creation.
Totally.
And unfortunately, most people don't know this. When you, in most states, I believe every state I've investigated,
Okay.
when you get a driver's license, you are automatically enrolled in selective service already. Okay. If you go to the post office, I know this at my post office, they have the little cards and they say mandatory registration, right? But when they say mandatory, you still have to sign the contract. Okay. And guess what is mandatorily required to register? Your artificial fiction. And yet they intentionally confuse you, the living man or woman, to be that artificial fiction, which is why the passport is so important.
Okay.
You have your passport, you get your passport file, you say, nope, sorry. You can take my artificial fiction, but you can't take my body and me. Okay, go ahead. If you're going to compulsory register them, but do not confuse that artificial fiction that is now in a trust where I am the acting trustee. I don't think it's in the benefit of my trust for my artificial fiction to have its name signed onto your war.
Right.
Even that is bad enough, right? I don't want to send any spiritual energy to fight that battle. Okay. So the passport and a trust structure is really valuable for that, for being able to battle that. Because if they come calling and knocking, you show them a passport, you're an internationally protected person. They should not be able to kidnap and drag you to war.
Okay.
And then if they take you to court, you have your trust documents where you do the same thing. Instead of battling Wells Fargo, you'd be like, prove jurisdiction right now, prove it.
Okay.
And you have to have those in place, you guys, before they come knocking. So please, it's a free course. You can get started as soon as you read this. I'm sure you'll put the link below, right? And
yeah. Yes, we're going to put all the good links.
And then if you got a driver's license and you automatically got signed up for selective service, or you did my husband, you know, when he believed all the propaganda around 9/11 and he signed up for selective service on his own free will, you can rescind contracts that are not in your best interest. And I teach that in the free course. It's like a little bonus module. I'll have to look at the legislation, the new legislation, and see how they worded it. But without reading it, I can tell you your best bet is the state national, American national passport. And then the next level is getting your trade name trust and a trust structure set up for you.
Okay. All right. Here's my absolute last question for you for today, and hopefully we can do this again in the future. How do you want to be remembered, Becky?
I don't need to be remembered. I want my kids to, I think that's the only thing that's lacking. I'm so dedicated to this mission that, I dedicate a lot to it and not as much as I want to my kids. So I hope that my kids remember me as it being worth it to them, and that they still get to build the life they have. But I don't need to be remembered. I'm not doing that for this. I'm doing this for my grandchildren's who probably won't ever even know my name, and that's fine with me. Honestly, because this isn't about me. This is about, soul to soul contracts and building a better world for the future me that might incarnate and have a totally different name.
Totally.
So there you go.
Awesome. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. My website is consciouscontracting.life. because conscious contracting should be a way of life.
Yeah.
Consciouscontracting.life.
Oh,
And I hope, and you go there, scroll down a little bit, and you'll see a box to get to the free course, and you should definitely start there. And
okay.
then if it resonates with you all, we have more to offer, and you'll have access to that on my website.
All right. Thank you again. Thank you for being here on this planet right here, right now, and doing and putting up the best fight ever. So
Thank you.
you are
Thank
appreciated.
you guys for listening and being a part of it, even if you're just listening for now, and hopefully you'll take steps when it's right for you.
Okay.
Bye.